Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 46. The True Final Boss. Human civilization was a mistake. The path of our growth was incorrect. Krishtaria Wodime. Has it finally come? The Saintess set the black teacup in her hand down on the table as if she were facing a great enemy. During this period, the Saintess had also followed the players through who knew how many runs of Extreme Abyss. She could already sense the upper and lower limits of the player group's combat strength. It was no exaggeration to say that the players ranked in the top 10 of Extreme Abyss were all top-tier powerhouses who would be feared even in the Holy Nation. And the one publicly acknowledged as the strongest in Oath was someone both the Saintess and the Empire wanted to win over at all costs. Griff, Freya, proceed according to our previous arrangements. We absolutely cannot neglect Lord Kyo. Everyone, use your main consciousness. We must make Lord Kyo fall for me after he finishes this main story. The Saintess immediately began gathering the Holy Nation, as well as those gacha pool characters who had already submitted to her side. Every single one of them used their main consciousness. Their goal was to give Kyo the most perfect story experience. Then, Carl discovered that Kyo had not placed him in the party. During this period, he really had been playing monster battles the entire time and had not cared about the outside world at all. Fortunately, as the final boss of the story, Carl could still watch the whole process from outside Saint Right in the posture of the mastermind behind the scenes. In the end, Carl could tell that this Saintess actually carried a bit of a sneaky girl attribute, meaning the kind of underhanded woman who would jump the gun in romantic competition. In Oath version 1's story, the biggest landmine at the start was the player fainting after Noir glared at them once. This did not change when Kyo pushed the story. But after Kyo woke up, the Saintess provided Kyo with a lap pillow service that other players, or rather, most players did not get. Lord Savior, are you all right? The Saintess asked Kyo with concern. Unfortunately, Kyo was a player who had long since seen through and grown tired of every kind of routine. His first reaction after sitting up was not, "The Saintess gave me a lap pillow bonus." Instead, it was, "You, a gacha character, don't know how to keep the service equal for all players. You're very likely to get flamed. You," or referring to the other townspeople. "I use different ways to care for the injured, but you alone are special, Lord Savior." While the Saintess played dumb, she frantically recalled the plot Kuro the writer had written in the first version. Because gacha pool characters could not use their main consciousness to take care of the experience of tens of millions of players, once the second version of the story was finalized, the Saintess had no way to change it on a large scale. But on a small scale, letting some players experience the first version plot was still no problem. Although once these little moves of the Saintess were exposed by observant players, it would cause a major rhythm like Kyo said, about uneven service, meaning every player's experience was different. The official team of Oath had also explicitly forbidden these gacha pool characters from modifying the main story on a large scale. Adding a few small, self-designed touches in a limited range was the end of it. But in order to make Kyo swear loyalty to her, the Saintess could no longer care that much. "Let's go. There are still quite a few missions to do afterward, aren't there?" Kyo was too lazy to fuss over these things and continued pushing the main story. But in the following story performances, whether it was the Saintess or the people of the Holy Nation, they really were doing their utmost to recreate the masterpiece, meaning the first version of the story written by Kuro. Unfortunately, Noir was not that cooperative. Perhaps this character was relying on the writer's favoritism, because he still kept causing all kinds of trouble in the story. But none of that was a big deal. The Saintess could sense that Kyo was watching the entire main story process with great interest the whole time. At least he was not like some players who used a special time-skipping ability, meaning a mouse macro autoclicker, to click through the dialogue at lightspeed. At the very least, Kyo patiently watched every line of dialogue and every performance from the Saintess and the people of the Holy Nation. During this period, he even occasionally gave some of his own thoughts. It worked. After the Saintess watched Kyo seriously push through all the content in the first stage of the main story from beginning to end, she was certain that he had definitely been conquered by her charm and moved by the bonds with the people of the Holy Nation. When the first stage of the main quest ended and Kyo led the people of the Holy Nation to the entrance of the ruins, the Saintess's mood grew tense. Because quite a few players from Navigator had pushed the main story to the entrance of the ruins and then stopped continuing into the second stage, But during these 7 days, Kyo had really been in a disconnected state aside from playing auto battler. Carl also had not disturbed him, causing him to have no idea that the side quest existed. So Kyo smoothly entered the second stage final battle main story directly. When the Saintess saw Kyo step into the second stage main story without hesitation, she shouted excitedly in her heart. As long as they killed that final boss named Carl, she would be able to lead a large number of powerful saviors back to the Holy Nation. After Kyo entered the final decisive battle main story, there first came an extremely hyped CG where all the current version's gacha pool characters gathered. As the final boss, Carl burned down the entire Saint Right and appeared in the form of a half-mutated body. "Why is it you again?" Kyo asked when he saw that the final boss was Carl. After all, the Calamity mutation fought in the last version was also nominally Carl. "Who knows? After all, I'm just an ordinary 3-star character. I don't have any decision-making power." After Carl said this, he glanced at the people of the Holy Nation standing beside Kyo. Kyo immediately understood after hearing this. Then his gaze swept over the Saintess and the others, before finally asking a line that made everyone around him, including the Saintess, feel terrified. "So Carl, what should I do next?" Lord Savior, he is a mutated body infected by the Calamity virus." The Saintess quietly reminded Kyo. The other party was the final boss. Why were you asking him questions? However, Kyo only looked at Carl with an extremely expectant gaze, as if asking Carl, "What should I do next? Who should I kill next? Do you have any mission for me?" Kyo's eyes seemed to be asking Carl, "What kind of interesting fun would you bring me next?" "Lord Savior, you must not be bewitched by him." When the Saintess saw that Carl seemed about to say something, she hurriedly tried to dissuade him from the side. But Carl merely smiled and gave Kyo an extremely simple answer. "Just make the choice you find interesting. After all, the duty of us game characters has always been to bring happiness to you players, hasn't it?" "The choice I find interesting, huh?" After Kyo learned that the final boss was Carl, he turned around, looked at the Saintess, then at the gacha pool characters from the Holy Nation and Empire who had gathered to participate in the decisive battle, and asked, "Everyone, can you spare his life? Lord Savior, I know he was once your friend, but now, he has been corroded by the Calamity virus and is no longer that person." Griff spoke the persuasion lines he had prepared long ago. The Calamity virus will only bring endless pain to those it corrodes, and ending his pain is our duty, Miss Freya from the Holy Nation also encouraged from the side. "Lord Savior, you still have so many companions by your side supporting you. This is the final decisive battle. Defeat that sorrowful mutated body and walk toward a better tomorrow together with us." The Saintess also repeated the inspiring lines that should appear in the final decisive battle, lines she had already memorized by heart. "Is that so? I understand," Kyo said after a moment of silence. "There is no need to be sad, Lord Savior. No matter what happens, I, Saintess Lilista, will forever stay by your side. Always support." However, just as the Saintess thought Kyo had finally made up his mind to strike down the final boss, and as she began her heartfelt confession to Kyo, preparing to promise him the next lifetime, Kyo slowly drew the sword in his hand, and then, a shrill sound of blade-piercing flesh rang out. Lord Savior. The Saintess came back to her senses and looked down, only to discover that the target Kyo had drawn his sword and stabbed was not the final boss behind her, but her. The instant Kyo drew his sword, he had pierced through her chest almost without the slightest hesitation. The blade entered flesh, blood flew everywhere. Kyo even felt that was not enough. He twisted the rapier stabbed into the Saintess's chest, grinding and warping the flesh, causing blood to spray out. Why? The Saintess felt the pain coming from her chest. This was the first time she had suffered such a serious injury since coming to this world, and the one who had caused this injury was the savior she trusted the most. "Because I've already heard you people say too many times, who is right and who is wrong. It's always you who decide what can be done, what cannot be done, who can be killed, and who cannot be killed. And this time, whether it is good or evil, I will decide for myself." After Kyo finished speaking, he directly pulled the long sword out of the Saintess's chest. Blood gushed from the wound in the Saintess's chest, staining Kyo's cheek. After Kyo wiped away the blood on his cheek with his hand, his gaze swept across every gacha pool character present. With his other hand, which was already stained with the Saintess's blood, he issued an invitation to all the gacha pool characters present. Just as you all said earlier, come, everyone. The final battle has begun. Prove to me that you are the side of justice. And at that very moment, the final decisive battle BGM rang out. But it was not the final boss's BGM, it was Oath's theme song, the BGM that represented the player. At that instant, all the gacha pool characters present seemed to understand something extremely terrifying. That was, what did it mean when, at the end of the game version, all the gacha pool characters gathered for the final battle, ready to shout slogans like friendship, bonds, fate, future, tomorrow, and so on as they charged forward, only to discover that the final boss they had to fight was the player. Chapter 47, Answer Me. Kyo's sword strike against the Saintess was meant to tell the gacha pool characters that he was serious. But after actually making a move, Kyo was also a little surprised. How was he really able to injure the Saintess? Normally, when players attacked friendly NPCs in the game, didn't the attack detection pass right through the game character? And this tiny wound was not much of an injury to the Saintess at all. Kyo watched as the wound on the Saintess's chest rapidly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even the traces of blood were erased. Of course, Oath did not allow players to harm gacha pool characters. Any action that harmed gacha pool characters or even friendly NPCs would be prohibited by Elysium and the official game company. Once a player made an action to stab and injure a gacha pool character, the player's sword should have suddenly drifted through them like a clipping bug, without actually touching the gacha pool character. This was also the rule set by default by the official team of Oath in most Elysium system online games. As for why Kyo could injure the Saintess now, maybe Elysium also wanted to see how things would develop afterward. Elysium had always been seeking change. From initially cooperating with game companies to develop money-grubbing paid online games, to the current gacha mobile games, the player experience had indeed been getting better and better. At least Oath currently had an extremely high praise rate among the player base, its number of online players had reached a new high, and its revenue was also explosively good. All these outstanding results made Elysium still trust the official team of Oath extremely much at this stage. But who could have known that a huge variable like Carl would suddenly appear? So Elysium held an observing attitude, wanting to see what kind of huge stunt Carl could pull. As for the group of gacha pool characters in Oath, they had also been frightened by Kyo's sudden backstab and did not know what to do. Especially the Saintess, who was kneeling on the ground as she looked at her healing wound, somewhat at a loss. No, it was still the Saintess's secret guard, Griff, who was the first to realize that something was wrong with the situation. The killing intent on Kyo was real. For some reason, Elysium's protection over the gacha pool characters had also failed at this moment. This made Griff realize that Kyo was serious. If a fight broke out, Kyo really might be able to kill them. Although Elysium's game characters were undying and indestructible, the calamity virus did not spread only through air or liquid. It could also spread through the human heart. Once these game characters suffered intense pain for a long time, it would increase their infection rate and condition from the calamity virus. The pain of being stabbed and pierced, even if the wound could instantly heal, would still lead to calamity virus infection once it accumulated too much, or even worsen the symptoms of infection. Therefore, Lord Kyo, we have already understood your resolve. How about we end things here today? We will no longer harm the person behind you. Griff, this veteran who had fought 100 battles, immediately activated survival mode and proposed a plan that gave both sides a way down, each taking one step back. However, when Kyo heard Griff begging for mercy, deep disappointment appeared on his face. But Kyo still looked at Carl behind him and asked. They said that, shopkeeper, do you want to end it just like this? The reason Kyo was disappointed was not because Griff was too cowardly. It was because, you are game characters. If you are afraid of dying, you can establish an agreement for a duel arena where no one gets hurt. In any case, whenever a player's interest is ignited, you, as game characters, must respond. The player's excitement is already up, and you actually say you are not fighting. Do you still have even a little professional ethics as game characters? No. They did not. Carl knew very clearly that these gacha pool characters all viewed players from a high and mighty position. As characters in a gacha game, they had the qualification to do so because players needed to spend large amounts of money and time. They also needed to gamble on luck, and had to bet on extremely good luck before players could smoothly bring these gacha pool characters home. So it was very normal for players to spoil these gacha characters, and it was also very normal for these game characters to take the player's love for granted. But this was not something that should be taken for granted. Even if they took a step back, there was indeed a large group of saviors following that saintess, preparing to go and save her homeland. These heroes would save your homeland in the future. Where was your most basic respect for them? Unfortunately, under the official Oath team's social media management, community comment control, and the mindless worship of some players, the saintess could treat those heroes who extended a helping hand to her with the attitude of looking at servants, attendants, or even pets, with contempt. What Carl found most unacceptable was, the saintess knew very clearly how to treat players kindly and respect players. How to fulfill the duties a game character should have. Ever since she collaborated with all the characters from the Holy Nation to put on the first version of the plot for Kyo, trying her best not to let Noir's plot disgust him. She understood very clearly what she should truly do, but unfortunately, she did not do it. Perhaps it was because of laziness, or perhaps because she had the official Oath team backing her. So, Carl now wanted to make all players understand, and in the process, wake up this group of people who mistook player affection for something taken for granted. It just so happened that Carl remembered a certain character from a game he had played before. His method of education was very suitable for use here. Although Carl did not know whether doing this would work, after Carl activated the recording function that came with his web page, he said to Kyo, "I can let you leave, but before that, I want all of you to answer me one question. Every single one of you has the correct answer to this question in your heart. I want you to say it truthfully. Then I can let you leave. Now answer me." Carl's gaze swept over every gacha pool character present before he asked, "What is the most important thing for a game character?" In response to Carl's question, Hasumi, who had been acting as a background character throughout this version but whose personality was still attention-grabbing, seized the opportunity at this moment. "Charm." She hurriedly raised her hand to attract everyone's attention and said, "I can answer this question. The most important thing for us as companions of the saviors is our own charm." Hasumi answered Carl eagerly with her usual sparkling expression. "As game characters, we should always maintain our most dazzling appearance to welcome the arrival of the saviors, making them captivated by our beauty and charm. That is what's most important." To Hasumi's answer, Carl replied noncommittally, "That is one of the answers, but there are many game characters who don't have a dazzling appearance like yours, yet are still deeply loved by players. And Hasumi, I believe that deep in your heart, there must be an answer that touches you even more, what you truly want to say. Why don't you just say it?" Carl's question instantly froze Hasumi's previously confident and eloquent expression in place. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak her true thoughts and desires from the bottom of her heart. But then, as if she were worried about something, she closed her mouth again. Because Hasumi knew that the truest answer in her heart would touch upon the interests of Oath and the official team of Oath. It would be an act of provocation and betrayal toward the official team of Oath. For a character like her, who relied on the official Oath team for her livelihood, even as a limited character, she did not dare to touch that taboo. Unwilling to answer, Hasumi is like this, and so are you all, hiding your true thoughts deep in your hearts, right? In that case, as Carl said this, the sound of an electric arc suddenly crackled by his ear. At that moment, Carl looked to the side and found Noir, who had been lurking in the shadows, had suddenly flickered to his side at some unknown point. In his hand, he had formed a dagger flickering with lightning, which he thrust toward Carl's neck. Why waste so many words? Wouldn't it be over if we just killed him? Noir's flamboyant personality was likely why Koi liked him. Fool, Griff cursed under his breath after seeing Noir dare to sneak attack Carl. Then, in the next second, the wrist of the hand Noir used to stab at Carl was suddenly grabbed by a hand that appeared out of nowhere. It was Kyo. Wah! Before the guy could react, the moment Kyo grabbed his wrist, he used his other palm to deliver a sudden, heavy upward strike to his chin. Teeth snapped, jawbone shattered, the back of the neck twisted, and a concussion. These were all the injuries Noir sustained from that single blow, but it wasn't over yet. Kyo was still holding the guy's wrist. Before he could react, even while he was still floating in midair, Hasumi's rapier materialized in Kyo's hand, wrapped in beams of dawn radiance. At extreme speed, it pierced both of Noir's arms, incinerating the tendons, veins, and flesh in his arms. He couldn't react. He couldn't react at all. To outsiders, it all happened in less than 2 seconds. After finishing this, The rapier in Kyo's hand vanished, replaced by him directly grabbing the guy's neck and slamming him hard onto the ground with terrifying strength. This strike was also imbued with Hasumi's Dawn Radiance, except the power was applied to Kyo's arm instead of her rapier. The ground cracked under the power of Dawn Radiance, and Noir coughed up blood from the terrible impact. As he lay on the ground, he finally reacted and tried to counterattack, only to find that his hands could not move. Immediately after, Kyo stepped directly onto his neck. "This isn't right, why can a savior?" Perhaps he wanted to ask why a player could be so cruel. "Sorry, you haven't seen how vicious we are during PvP. This is only the simplest subject 1. Unfortunately, Kyo's gaze remained devoid of any emotional fluctuation, yet his actions were merciless. Kyo increased the pressure of his foot, snapping his neck with a single stomp, yet he remained alive, but what did that matter? Kyo lifted his foot and switched the power attached to his body to Griff's strength enhancement. Then, he kicked mercilessly at Noir's face, the face that Koi had likely dreamed about countless times. Under everyone's gaze, Noir rolled across the ground several times in a row, like a stone thrown across water, bouncing several more times before his battered body slammed heavily into a tree. Only after leaving a deep dent on the surface of the tree did he finally stop. He was completely unconscious, simple, efficient, and cruel. At this moment, all the gacha pool characters present realized that Kyo had originally made a name for himself through PvP. In the completely realistic world of Elysium, the PvP powerhouses among players could basically be said to have emerged from a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses, treading upon the bodies and blood of countless players. When they struck, they truly didn't know the meaning of mercy. Well, Elysium games were all rated 12+ to 16+, so player PvP wouldn't feature blood or mangled wounds and such. In short, continuing the previous topic, Carl spoke as if he hadn't seen Noir's miserable state. His gaze once again swept over all the gacha pool characters present, whose foreheads were already dripping with cold sweat, and said, "It seems you are still unwilling to speak your heart's true answer. Since that's the case, Kyo, if you'd please, beat them until they are willing to speak the truth." Chapter 48, You Pass. If one only wished to be happy, this could be easily accomplished, but we wish to be happier than other people, and this is always difficult, for we believe others to be happier than they are. Montesquieu. Carl was serious. Kyo was serious too. Every gacha pool character present had fully realized that. Yet they still hesitated to speak their true thoughts. Or rather, they did not dare to. Thus, if we don't have a match with Lord Kyo today, we really won't be able to leave. As the captain of the Holy Nation's Vanguard Knight Order, Griff, the standard 5-star Annihilation character, finally stepped forward and spoke. "Thanks." Kyo actually smiled at that moment. The reason Kyo thanked him was likely because Griff was willing to step forward and be a worthy opponent. "I know I can't beat you in my current state. It's a pity. I originally wanted to save this for when my special form is released in the future." After Griff removed his heavy armor and shouldered his greatsword, he activated a state called Overload. His entire body was covered in pitch-black fur, and his form transformed into that of a werewolf, though he still held that greatsword in his hand. "Watch out!" Griff let out a low roar and lunged at Kyo. The ground was left with a cracked indentation from Griff's charge. The lycanthropized Griff moved so fast that, logically, most saviors would not even be able to react. But, Kyo drew his sword and kept up with Griff's movements. Not only that, he even parried the greatsword Griff swung. No, it would be more accurate to say he used exquisite technique to deflect every one of Griff's greatsword strikes. Damn it, Griff had long known that he was no match for Kyo, but during the exchange, he clearly felt as though he were only a hair's breadth away from touching him. Yet the result was always Kyo seizing an opening to counterattack, while Griff could only perform futile blocks with his greatsword. Just as the wounds on Griff's body multiplied, a pitch-black magic circle suddenly lit up beneath Kyo's feet. More accurately, it spread across the entire area. This was the Saintess's ability. She had constructed a binding magic circle in this zone and successfully restrained Kyo. Lady Saintess. Griff stopped swinging his sword, momentarily unsure whether to continue attacking. "What are you dazing around for, Griff? Haven't you realized yet? Lord Savior is the type who enjoys a challenge. He said he wanted to challenge all of us. This isn't against the rules." After hesitating for a long time, the Saintess finally made this decision. Mainly, she really did not want to be interrogated by Carl any longer. After receiving the order, Griff said, "Pardon me," to Kyo, then immediately lunged again like a cannonball, greatsword in hand, toward the bound Kyo. Kyo could not dodge this strike. Even if Griff traded injury for injury, a single downward slash from the greatsword would bring Kyo's health points to 0. Not to mention, the other gacha pool characters from the Holy Nation had already locked onto Kyo with their magic and skills. It was over. Griff raised his greatsword high and slashed down toward Kyo's head. However, he felt no sensation of cutting through flesh. WH, what? Griff's eyes widened as he stared at the figure that had suddenly appeared in front of Kyo. Clad in heavy armor and wielding a greatsword, this figure was none other than himself. Or rather, it was the standard 5-star Annihilation character, Griff, that Kyo had raised. I actually quite like greatsword type characters, so I leveled you to the max. Instead, Kyo asked Griff with a hint of curiosity. What are you so surprised about? You should understand that putting the characters we pulled into a party to fight alongside us is the most basic ability of us players, isn't it? Griff leapt backward and looked at the version of himself now controlled by Kyo. This, Griff, included in the party was equivalent to a clone. He could naturally control this clone with his main consciousness. But, I am currently in my overload state, and my strength is several times greater than when I'm in the standard gacha pool. Do you really think the past me can withstand the current me? Griff let out a low growl, seemingly feeling slighted by Kyo. How will we know without trying? Kyo asked calmly. Griff did not hesitate and pounced at his double, but to his shock, Kyo's, Griff, erupted with a power that even the original could not comprehend. Why? Because my methods are a bit rough. As Kyo spoke, he commanded his, Griff, to charge at the original. At that moment, bone-crushing cracks echoed from all over Kyo's, Griff, making one's teeth ache. And, Griff's, health points were also steadily declining. After Griff used all his strength to clash with the version of himself controlled by Kyo several more times, he realized that in terms of combat technique alone, he was completely no match for the Griff manipulated by Kyo. Also, I actually pulled the Saintess too, Kyo mentioned casually, as if it were a trivial matter. Oh no, by the time Griff realized it, it was already too late. Kyo's Saintess had quietly risen into the sky at some point, her wand condensing terrifying magic particles. Normally, the Saintess's signature, light cannon, required a few seconds to charge, but Kyo used this skill, which should have been a massive laser beam, as a series of small, concentrated bursts. The miniature beams formed by the condensed magic particles possessed staggering piercing power. By the time the original Griff and Saintess reacted, it was too late. The first shot pierced the Saintess's shoulder, forcing her to deactivate the binding magic circle. He then followed up with a binding magic circle of his own, pinning her face down to the ground, unable to move. The second shot pierced Griff's ankle, robbing him of his mobility. Losing to yourself in the end isn't funny at all. Griff collapsed to his knees, watching the Griff and Saintess, controlled by Kyo, walk toward him with vacant expressions. The original Griff summoned every ounce of strength remaining in his body and lunged at Kyo. This drew a soft sigh from Kyo. He had intended to stop there, but if they insisted on fighting to the end. Slash, Griff, Kyo commanded his, Griff. At this order, Kyo's, Griff, transformed into a dark blur, his muscles straining to the point of tearing as his power enhancement was pushed to the absolute limit. He raised his greatsword high and struck his original self. The two great swords collided in midair, and the shockwave whipped up the surrounding leaves, scattering them everywhere. The sound of a blade severing bone rang out. Half of a greatsword spun into the air before eventually landing beside the original Griff. That's why I didn't want to be his enemy. After uttering these words, half of Griff's body slumped to the ground, blood gushing like a fountain. Lord Griff. The other gacha pool characters from the Holy Nation tried to rush forward, but several magic circles unfolded in the sky. The Saintess, controlled by Kyo, had already prepared the massive area of effect ultimate, final purification, and aimed it right at them. At that moment, Carl walked to the edge of the battlefield, stopping beside the half-bodied Griff. Can't this be fixed? Carl muttered with some exasperation, picking up the two halves of Griff's body and fitting them together. Then a medical miracle occurred. Griff was fully restored. However, he was completely traumatized by Kyo. Realizing he was no longer an opponent, he sat on the ground and resigned himself to Carl's judgment. Are you willing to answer now? Tell me the true answer in your hearts. After saying that, Carl turned his gaze to the remaining gacha pool characters. What is the most important thing for a game character? Faced with Carl's relentless questioning, Freya finally snapped. She shouted at Carl in a nearly broken state. Obeying the players' orders and pleasing them. Isn't that the answer you want to hear? Are we game characters nothing more than the players' playthings? In response to Freya's desperate outburst, Carl let out a long sigh. This is just an answer born from giving up on thinking and choosing to escape, just like how you willingly became accomplices to the game developers. Peacefully enjoying and exploiting the players' feelings for you. If players truly only wanted you to follow orders, then why did Kyo smile when Griff accepted the challenge? Even if Griff was defeated, it would only have increased the players' appreciation for him. As Carl spoke, he glanced at Kyo and Griff, who was sitting on the ground. At that moment, Kyo was patting Griff on the shoulder and comforting him, saying something like, "I've fought for tens of thousands of hours on the battlefield. It's normal that you can't beat me. Next time, I'll teach you a move or two." This also verified Carl's claim. Players definitely did not want some megaphone that only knew how to obey orders. So, I still haven't heard the true answer from your hearts. Carl's questioning struck the hearts of every gacha pool character like a death knell. There is definitely a correct answer in your hearts. You just don't want to say it. It seems, only by using some extraordinary means can I get you to tell the truth. Carl said. Extraordinary means? What extraordinary means? The Saintess struggled. After undoing the binding magic circle from herself, she clutched the wound on her shoulder, which, for some reason, had not healed. Glancing at the characters from the Holy Nation, she quickly realized that everyone present combined could not defeat Kyo. Nor could they defeat those in Kyo's party, even the characters who were her own clones. The Saintess had no choice but to start calling for help from other players. This was a space that was impossible to escape from without killing Carl. Either Kyo gave up on this main quest, or Carl was taken out. With the assistance of other players, taking out Carl would be a breeze. But the key was, would Kyo agree to let other players join his great world? No. He definitely would. After finding reinforcements, the Saintess asked Kyo. Lord Kyo, you probably don't want to be bored because you can't find an opponent, right? This was the Saintess's most common use of reverse psychology. But Kyo's reply saw right through the Saintess's little scheme. You still don't understand that my current fun doesn't lie in defeating you, but rather in being curious about where the shopkeeper, meaning Carl, will lead the final ending. As Kyo spoke, he turned his gaze toward Carl. So, should I let those reinforcement players of the Saintess join my great world? It might develop into PvP on the scale of several large guilds, Kyo asked. That is exactly the result I want. Don't worry, we still have quite a few allies. This was the result Carl wanted, and the best opportunity for the Elysium assessment task. See how many players will choose to support you. At the same time, it could achieve one of Carl's most important ultimate goals. That was to draw the Oath officials into the fray. Carl did not know whether this mass PvP between two-player factions would be ignored by the Oath officials, lead to forced server maintenance, or prompt the Oath officials to intervene and mediate. In the first two cases, as long as Carl completed the Elysium assessment, he would accept it. If the Oath officials could not hold back and personally stepped in, then, the fun would really begin. Because the one Carl truly wanted to interrogate in front of thousands of players was the Oath officials themselves. So, Carl accepted letting Kyo allow in all those players who requested to join his great world and wanted to test their skills against him. Kyo did a simple screening, first selecting a group of old rivals he knew well from past games and letting them in. Although the players entering Kyo's great world knew each other, this time, they had accepted the Saintess's commission to crusade against Kyo and Carl. What a farce. The president of Dome Alliance, currently ranked 3rd in Extreme Abyss, was a player with the game ID Vengeful Blood. He was the first to accept the Saintess's commission, and after entering Kyo's great world, he said this. The reinforcements are finally here. After seeing the arrival of this powerhouse, whose strength was not inferior to Kyo's, the Saintess happily hurried over and led all the members of the Holy Nation to the side of the players acting as invaders. Meanwhile, Hasumi was standing among the crowd of gacha pool characters. After going from the much-anticipated launch limited character to becoming a background character for over 10 days, she seemed to have realized something and chose the opposite direction. This Night Princess faced the gradually gathering player crusade army. She bypassed the other gacha pool characters heading toward the tide of invaders and walked straight in the opposite direction until she reached Kyo's side, standing by him to express her stance. Knight of the Empire, did she choose such a risky move just to best me? The Saintess probably thought Hasumi was doing this to win Kyo's favor. Hasumi, what are you doing? The gacha pool characters from the Empire's side also questioned Hasumi. Such a decision to stand on the side of the villain instead of the general players would have a huge impact on Hasumi's character reputation. Instead, Hasumi strangely questioned her compatriots, the others who were also gacha pool characters. The strange ones are you. How can you stand so comfortably on the side of the savior's enemies? Hasumi's question stunned all the gacha pool characters present. Then, Hasumi turned her gaze toward Carl and said, "This also answers Sir Carl's question. I believe our most important duty is to make all the saviors who come to this world happy." Hasumi's words were equivalent to saying, the most important thing for a game character is to make all the players experiencing this game happy. So now I think if I am willing to stand by my savior and support him, he will definitely be happy. Hasumi said this while still maintaining that extremely self-centered tone. However, to avoid being misunderstood by the visiting players, Hasumi quickly added, "In this world line, I'm doing this because I'm Lord Kyo's knight. Of course, in other world lines, I've sworn to make all saviors captivated by my charm. So if you want to kill Carl in your own worlds, I will likewise support you and provide feedback. This is my resolve as a knight." As Hasumi said this, her tone suddenly became extremely low, mixed with self-reproach and pain. "Unfortunately, not all saviors can encounter me. It's not that they don't want to see me or have me, but they have bad luck and lack the financial means. So, Sir Carl, I'm actually not qualified to say, I want to make all saviors happy, because, when those saviors can't pull me from the gacha pool because of luck, I can't even offer them comfort. And I can't change anything, so, I am a derelict knight, a derelict game character. Is this the answer you wanted, Sir Carl?" Carl could understand Hasumi's pain. It was like being designed by a game designer from the very beginning as a character full of love. Yet all of her love required players to pay expensive sums of money to obtain. This character herself would probably be angry enough to want to fight the game planner. "No," Carl shook his head and said directly. "Remove that last sentence. The problem isn't with you. But regardless, it's enough that you can speak all this so frankly. Thank you for your answer." Hasumi had said all that. What else could Carl do? Naturally, it was, "You pass." Hasumi has given her answer, but I still haven't heard yours, nor the answer from the person who should be answering this question the most. Carl's gaze swept across the other gacha pool characters, including the Saintess, then looked up at the sky. This interrogation continued, not just of these gacha pool characters acting as accomplices, but also of the true masterminds behind the scenes. Chapter 49, The Culprit. Crimson Knight's video explaining the causes and consequences of the incident was finally released after a brutal, sleep-deprived editing sprint. In the video description, Crimson Knight even added a bonus line, "Save your future gaming experience. Please join me at Great World ID 104X and support Carl Agata." Making nostalgic videos was second nature to Crimson Knight. The content did not even need to be overly emotional. She only had to tell the players of the previous game about the current situation of their original waifus. However, Crimson Knight still concealed some of the truth at Sophia's request, such as the fact that those waifus had mutated into monsters. She simply told the players that they had retired and were now living in a place called Netherworld Village, but were still looking forward to reuniting with their former players. In short, under Crimson Knight's call, players from all sides, haters and fans alike, gathered in Kyo's World Line to participate in this grand event together. With things developing to this point, the first stage of Carl's goal was complete. Then, Carl initiated the second stage of his plan. Using the Academy's personal terminal, Carl directly contacted Irene, who had been acting as a background character on the battlefield, or rather, in this game. At this stage, Irene only had a few plot points in the main story. If not for her incredibly strong universal buffing power, she might have become the character with the least presence in Oath. And now, Irene was likely about to fire the most critical shot in the history of Oath. "Irene, hurry, shoot the unconscious Noir under that big tree. Wake him up." Irene received Carl's message immediately. "But Lord Carl, that person wants to kill you." Irene clutched her musket, looking somewhat lost in the crowd. During this time, Irene had actually been hanging out with Hasumi. Whether it was team compositions or life in the main world, that Night Princess took great care of Irene. Originally, Carl felt that his relationship with Irene might leave some hidden issues. After all, a master-servant relationship should either be disclosed to players early on or kept secret forever. But recently, Carl checked Irene's reputation on the real-world internet and discovered that players were actually shipping Irene and Hasumi as a couple. A dashing, elegant Night Princess and a shy, introverted little maid. The two formed a perfect team pairing and had plenty of interactions in the story and the great world. Coupled with Hasumi's innate habit of helping the weak to show off her charm, players felt that these two were surprisingly complementary when paired together. Just watching the two interact was enough to make players grin like proud aunts. In short, Carl saw this as a good thing. Anyway, back to the point. It's precisely because I want revenge that I need to wake him up. Irene, find a hidden spot and keep using recovery bullets to heal him. I want him to stay alive, Carl said. After Irene's role was changed to support, all her bullets became recovery and buffing bullets, with damage close to zero. But in exchange, she gained decent healing and absurd buffing power. You understood. Irene stumbled along with her flintlock rifle, found a position far from the fray, and began sniping. The magic bullet shooter ability granted to Irene by Elysium allowed her bullets to curve. With this ability's enhancement, even if her marksmanship was terrible, she could hit people using her will alone. So Irene aimed directly at the unconscious Noir beneath the distant tree and fired her ultimate skill, Final Contract, multicolored bullets. In that instant, Noir was successfully buffed. Not only did he receive an attack boost and damage amplification, but his health also began regenerating continuously. This caused him to wake up immediately. Curse you, Savior. Noir touched the pain on his cheek and neck, instantly looking up at the battlefield, intending to find the Savior for revenge. He suddenly discovered that, at some point, the battlefield had become filled with saviors. However, Noir now felt frighteningly powerful. Just as well, this saves me the trouble of eliminating you one by one. From the very beginning, this character's script was that of a flamboyant villain, so he immediately struck out, piercing a player's chest with a bolt of pitch-black thunder. But that single action made the players, who were currently intensely exchanging opinions on the battlefield, notice his presence. Is that Noir, or is someone cosplaying him? Are you stupid? Oath hasn't implemented a costume system yet. Our appearance only changes based on the character we copy. In other words, it's the real deal. Information spread quickly among the players. Once they confirmed that the figure on the battlefield was indeed the real Noir, Ryan, the Vice Guild Master of Crimson Sigil, stepped forward and turned his microphone volume to the maximum. Everyone, all eyes on me. Look at me, look at me. Stop fighting. Everyone, stop. It had to be said that Ryan held a certain level of prestige among the players. After all, he was a raid leader who had achieved multiple world-first clears of high-difficulty content. After Ryan shouted in the public channel, the players who had been at each other's throats immediately stopped. I know everyone has mixed feelings about the version 1.1 story. Some think it's good, some think it's bad, that's all fine. But for those who now think this character Noir deserves to die, type 1 in the public chat. When Ryan shouted this, Kyo's Great World Chat channel instantly exploded, with a flood of 11,111,111 messages flashing by. Okay, usually, we can't hit NPCs because of system restrictions. But this time, some hidden plot must have been triggered, allowing us to attack NPCs. So what are you waiting for? Noir is right here, get him. Under Ryan's call, players from both factions, whether they stood with the Saintess or with Carl, all unanimously stopped their current disputes. They raised their blades, spears, and clubs, then began to frantically beat up Noir. You, ungrateful saviors, damn it, why won't you die? After continuously enduring a barrage of ice, fire, lightning, and sword attacks from the players, Noir was covered in wounds from head to toe, yet he found that he simply could not die. This was because not only was Irene sniping him with healing shots from the shadows, but many wicked players were also secretly restoring Noir's health from the sidelines. In short, this display of player rage would likely last a long time, but Carl's goal in pushing Noir to the forefront was not just to give the players their deserved justice. There was another purpose, bait. Carl was certain that the official Oath team must be monitoring the situation here. Normally, the Oath officials would definitely not intervene. They would just wait until the players had caused enough trouble. However, that was assuming the planners and operators at Oath were a group of normal people, which was unlikely. Real world, Oath headquarters. Mio had joined Oath's official headquarters. She did not know how she, the biggest #1 hater of Oath, had managed to slip directly into the company's middle management. But regardless, the film and television company she worked for had entered a long-term partnership with Oath, and she had been stationed at Oath headquarters as a liaison. Thus, Mio was currently watching the situation in Kyo's world line along with a crowd of Oath game planners, scriptwriters, and staff. So what should we do? Shut down the servers for maintenance? A staff member asked quietly. In this situation, ignoring it and giving it the cold treatment is the correct approach. Any official statement we make will only make the backlash worse. As a scriptwriter, Kuro provided the best solution, which was to ignore it. Players gathering for PvP was part of the game's mechanics. Why should they interfere? But what about the character being attacked? He's a future gacha pool character. This will cause his reputation to keep plummeting, a staff member said. If his reputation were good now, would players be surrounding him and beating him like this? Still ignore it. There's no need for us to protect a game character and drag the company and the game into an even bigger storm of public backlash. Kuro originally wanted to say that characters with bad reputations could just be shelved later on and kept from appearing in future story arcs. But unfortunately, with his current authority, he really could not make that happen. Then, to Kuro's despair, it turned out Oath really did have a few absolute geniuses on staff. They would rather drag the entire Oath game into endless player arguments and public backlash just to step out and protect a character like that. Why is scriptwriter Koi using her own account to go in front of the players? It's over. Go notify President Kim. Notifying him probably won't help, right? It might even make things worse. Kuro felt his head was about to explode as he watched the scriptwriter in the live stream blatantly use her own account to intervene. He did not feel even a hint of schadenfreude. Because many people present had poured their heart and soul into the Oath project, including himself. Whether they were scriptwriters, game designers, or character incubators. This profession was a general term for those responsible for modeling appearances, writing backstories, designing character growth arcs, and constantly observing a character's growth in Elysium to ensure it met design requirements. In short, the fact that Oath could maintain such high popularity and success was entirely due to these workers silently contributing behind the scenes. But inevitably, there were always some people who could take the hard-earned results of others and recklessly squander them with ease. At that moment, Mio sent news of the official Oath scriptwriter's intervention to Carl through the Oath mobile app. Did they take the bait that quickly? That efficiency is much faster than I expected. After learning that an official scriptwriter from Oath had intervened, Carl quickly found that figure near the crowd of players beating up Noir. Everyone, stop. There was no such thing as GM privileges in Elysium. Koi was using her own game account. Originally, she would not have been able to squeeze into the circle of players at all, but Carl had informed Crimson Knight of the arrival of the scriptwriter responsible for rewriting version 1.1. Under Crimson Knight's organization, the players barely stopped clearing a path for Koi to reach the character she doted on, Noir. Look at what you've all done. Our baby Noir works so hard in the story, and yet all he gets from you is collective abuse. Is there any justice in this? Koi did not seem to think there was anything wrong with her current actions at all. She shielded Noir as if protecting a child, accusing all the players present. Chapter 50. Where did all the money go? You're ill, I recommend suicide. Florence Nightingale. The players froze for a moment when they saw this player suddenly jump in to protect Noir, then immediately began asking who she was. Koi, I think she's the scriptwriter for the version 1.1 story. I thought the scriptwriter was Kuro. The first draft was written by Kuro, the writer behind the Fall of Goliath storyline in the previous game. Apparently, this new writer changed it in the second draft. Players were extremely well informed. As early as the launch of Oath version 1.1, they had already heard that the reason the version 1.1 story had received such mixed reviews was because it had been altered. When the players present realized that the person before them was the culprit responsible for feeding them garbage in version 1.1, they all swarmed around her. Why did you delete the scenes where I got close to the Saintess in the main story? Explain yourself. I don't know who said the first draft was supposed to be a sweet yet bittersweet romance, but what kind of crap did you turn it into? Is Noir your favorite husbando or something? You're protecting him both inside and outside the script. Facing the player's interrogation, Koi actually had the nerve to argue back with each of them. So what? The first draft was shallow. It was all about falling in love. It had no class at all. Only stinky gaming otaku like you would like it. When Carl heard Koi shout that loudly enough to be heard 3 streets away, PFF'd. Carl felt like his current expression was the face of someone trying so hard not to laugh that he looked like the Speed meme. Both brought endless joy to Carl, but since he was a game character, he could not laugh too openly. Koi's mass taunt naturally sparked public outrage, yet she continued shouting defiantly. You're all so petty. Are you even men? Faced with this question, the players present fell silent for a moment and parted to create a path. Crimson Knight stepped out from the crowd, looking at the spoiled giant baby before her with cold eyes. As a woman, I think I can teach you a few things. With that, Crimson Knight raised her fist and mercilessly gave Koi the lesson she had long deserved. And that is to respect the work other people put in. Go back to literature school for a few more years before coming out here and pretending to be a scriptwriter. In the world of Elysium, players could naturally adjust their pain perception. Setting it to 0 was no problem. However, that made it harder to sense incoming damage, so most players kept it at around 10% to 30%. As for those who rarely played games or never participated in combat content, they might not even know that pain perception could be adjusted. The stinging pain on her cheek sent her into a full-blown screaming meltdown. At this point, the Saintess could no longer bear to watch. Likely knowing that this scriptwriter had a good relationship with the higher UPS, she stepped forward and said, Dear Saviors, thank you for responding to my call and coming to our aid, but it was never my intention for you to kill each other. The Saintess certainly knew how to play peacemaker at a time like this. Unfortunately, Carl had been waiting for the Saintess to show herself. At that moment, Carl used his illusion to whisper eerily into Koi's ear. Great scriptwriter, I'm very curious about the relationship between the Saintess and Noir. Carl's question made Koi think of a way to get revenge on these damn players. You like the Saintess so much. You care about her that much. Fine. What else could it be? In the upcoming story, the Saintess is Noir's official love interest. There are scenes of Noir and the Saintess together in the next few versions. To the Saintess, you are the ones who don't belong here. When Koi shouted out her arrangements for the future story, not only the players, but even the Saintess herself froze in place, her mind going blank. What kind of nonsense plot is this? You stupid woman, stop talking. That was exactly what the Saintess was thinking at that moment. As for Carl, PFF'd. Carl had said before that the hardest part of playing Oath was holding back laughter. Is that really true? The players completely exploded, especially those who had spent money to pull the Saintess's contract souls. I even paid to max out the Saintess's CS. If the future plot really goes like this, won't I look like a total sucker? Selling maxed out Oath account. With the Saintess on it. Will I have to pay someone to take it soon? Maybe Noir will even be added to the gacha pool. Then pulling him will cost you even more. Although each player could only bind one account in Elysium series games, players still had plenty of ways to buy and sell accounts. No, Lord Saviors, I really have nothing to do with him. The Saintess looked like she was about to burst into tears. However, Carl's ghost-like questioning rang in her ears again. Now, I should be able to answer for you. What is the most important thing for a game character? Based on your current situation, it's being liked by players. Just as Carl said this teasingly, Koi was suddenly forced offline. Where did she go? Surely the Oath officials aren't going to bury their heads in the sand again. Yeah, give us an explanation. How did someone like this become a scriptwriter? At this moment, the players were truly outraged. Carl had originally thought the Oath officials would simply resort to their traditional specialty, playing dead and controlling the comments. But some high-ranking member of the Oath staff seemed a little unwilling to back down. After kicking Koi offline, he appeared before the players in the form of the Academy head. Another capable one. Carl's attention immediately shifted to the Academy head. Everyone, she was merely a temporary worker we hired, and she was only responsible for the version 1.1 story. Version 1.2 and the stories after that will still be handled by the writers you are familiar with. The Academy head used a gentle, calm voice to soothe every player present. Who are you? The person in charge of Oath. The Academy head ignored the players' questions and simply proceeded to announce some news that would make them happy. I will make a brief announcement here. Version 1.2 of Oath has been finalized and will take place in the Holy Nation. At that time, you will arrive at the prosperous city of Glory in the Holy Nation. Both the map and the amount of game content in that version will be 4 to 5 times larger than what we have now. Furthermore, there will be a large amount of story content related to the Saintess, and certain characters disliked by everyone will be shelved. We definitely won't let you down. Is this an official announcement that they're going to the Holy Nation next version? And with such a huge promise, it had to be said that the Academy head's reassuring attitude did calm the resentment of many players. At that moment, the Academy head turned his gaze toward Carl and communicated with him through a private channel that only the two of them could hear. Carl Agata, I must admit, you are a child highly favored by Elysium. Elysium has already handed over part of the management rights of Netherworld Village to you. Despite this, you are still an asset of Oath. Are you willing to work with us to develop Netherworld Village? At that time, I will grant you the authority to distribute reasonable amounts of contract stones to players at your discretion. The conditions the Academy head offered to recruit Carl were already very generous. Being able to distribute reasonable amounts of contract stones meant Carl could give out contract stones as rewards to players in the future. An NPC who directly handed out gacha currency. Such an NPC would likely be worshipped by players in any mobile game. But, unfortunately, I refuse. The development of Netherworld Village will be entirely led by me. You won't be allowed to touch a single inch of it. Carl's refusal was firm, but this did not mean he would be independent from the game Oath. Netherworld Village was still a part of Oath, a new map. It was simply that from now on, Netherworld Village and Carl himself would no longer fall under the Oath officials' jurisdiction. Are you sure? That place is just barren land with nothing in it. Without contract stone rewards for players, do you really think players will care about a crude and boring new map? The Academy head asked. That is not something you need to worry about. If I'm not mistaken, the City of Glory in the Holy Nation and Netherworld Village will both be implemented in version 1.2 of Oath at the same time. When the time comes, let's see which map the players prefer. After saying this, Carl directly cut off communication with the Academy head. The Academy head probably did not even have time to say, "You'll regret this." But just as the Academy head and his group finished soothing the players, making their promises, and preparing to leave, Carl quickly stepped forward and blocked his path. Changed your mind? It's not too late to beg me now, the Academy head said, glancing at Carl. No, I just have a question I've been curious about, though it might be a bit early to ask. Carl looked at the surrounding players. The Academy head likely thought Carl only wanted to ask some trivial question, so he nodded slightly and said, "You should be grateful I still have enough patience. Ask." The Academy head still wanted to recruit Carl, this special existence recognized by Elysium. It's simple. The question I want to ask is, where did all the money go? When Carl asked this, his voice and tone were actually very soft, although everyone around him could clearly hear the question. But because he did not understand the meaning behind Carl's question, the Academy head asked back in confusion. What do you mean by that? I'm asking you, the money for developing this game, Oath. Where the hell did it all go? Carl suddenly raised his voice. Even the players closest to Carl looked at him in surprise because of his sudden outburst. I don't know what you're asking. The Academy head's expression became serious as he stared at Carl, seemingly trying to avoid the question. Of course you don't know. Because you don't fucking play this game. Whether it's Elysium Academy or Saint Right, is there anything in either of them that can actually be called game content? Does the production quality of the main story really match this game's world-leading revenue? Where's the money? Where's the content that should have been added? You make so much money. Has even 1% of it been invested into developing actual game content? If not, where the hell did the money taken from the players' pockets go? As Carl reached this point, he realized he had lost his composure. Because, even the surrounding players did not understand what Carl was asking. Is Oath's quality really that bad? I don't feel that way right now, other players whispered among themselves. Carl did not blame these players because they had never experienced that kind of comparison. Now, the Oath officials had come out to say that version 1.2 would open a new map, but filling it with content would take time, and that being able to achieve this much with their limited capacity was already impressive. They could not understand why the criticism was so harsh. That was fine. Players were willing to believe it and felt it was reasonable. Oath was already a game that updated very quickly. But the Oath officials were fully capable of presenting higher quality game content. They just hadn't, and they weren't willing to. Because they were the only single-player open-world game in the world, they could just sit back and rake in money. Why bother making so much high-quality game content? It was simply that the players had nothing to compare it to. And Carl's current duty was to make the players realize they deserved to play better content. Everyone, let's stop here for today. We'll meet again in version 1.2. I hope I can bring you some surprises then. After going through so much, Carl said goodbye to all the players present with a hint of exhaustion. Regardless, Carl had already broken free from the control of the Oath officials. And now, Carl could finally let loose, create more interesting games, and let the players roast the Oath officials to hell and back. Chapter 51. I will satisfy you. Well then, good night, Terra. Good night, Universe. Kristen Wright. After this, the Saintess and the official Oath team worked desperately to repair their reputation. This included completely cutting ties with Noir, declaring Koi's words to be nothing more than rumors, and ensuring that the Saintess remained by the Savior's side in later scripts. Then, the official team had Kuro write 2 more side-story events filled with Saintess fanservice, while also revealing all the upcoming character previews for version 1.2 and beyond. The first new character for version 1.2 was still from the Holy Nation. She was designed as the Saintess's mentor, a limited 5-star support unit with a mature female model. The second character for the following versions was also from the Holy Nation, this time an abnormal role. She was an extremely rare limited 5-star female character with a small, childlike model. Her in-game role was closer to a sub-DPS, applying various debuffs to enemies in order to increase the team's overall damage and so on. After that came a merchant from the Free Alliance, a limited 5-star defender. Finally, the last previewed character was a new main DPS from the Empire. This lineup of upcoming characters, how should Carl put it? The upcoming limited 5-star characters were basically carrying the Saintess with all their might. At least for now, players who pulled for the Saintess could enjoy being at the top of the meta for 4 whole versions, right up until that new Empire main DPS made their debut. The planners were using this method to tell the players. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the Saintess's power level. At the very least, after pulling her, there would be no shortage of future characters designed to strengthen her. It was just that the banner schedule forced players to pull for 2 versions in a row, clearly aiming straight for their wallets. As for the players who pulled Hasumi at launch, they were in for a world of pain. Not only was her power level falling behind, but the characters meant to support her would not even arrive until 4 versions later. Even if her supports eventually arrived, the damage output of the new Empire main DPS 4 versions later would probably blow Hasumi out of the water by 10 miles. There was nothing that could be done about it. Carl felt, it was not that Hasumi had lost the popularity contest. Rather, the contest had been rigged from the very beginning for the Saintess to win. The official Oath team had most likely only finished the Holy Nation map. In any case, Carl did not believe the official Oath team would waste resources making 2 massive maps just for players to choose between them. This also hammered home the fact that Hasumi had actually been a sacrificial pawn from the start, used to squeeze out a wave of launch hype money before being cast aside. Regarding map production, the cities of the Holy Nation and the Empire did currently exist within Elysium. But a map for players to explore in a city where NPCs lived were 2 completely different concepts. Carl used the City of Glory in the Holy Nation, which players were about to visit in version 1.2, as an example. Before players arrived in this city, the City of Glory would definitely have undergone long-term artistic renovation by the official Oath team, adding a ton of beautiful but physically impossible and completely nonsensical architectural wonders. They would also have manually placed a huge number of treasure chests, monster distributions, reward mechanisms, and so on. All the elements a game map should have would need to be added before it could finally be presented to the players. After all, the original City of Glory could not possibly have a treasure chest every 1 or 2 steps, right? The NPCs living there would have opened them long ago. In any case, thanks to the official Oath team's lightning-fast apology and upcoming character reveals, combined with Kuro's intervention, the Saintess's reputation was barely salvaged. Meanwhile, Carl was currently resting in Mio's world line and conducting some simple surveys with Mio and other players. Why do I feel like Noir will show up in future plots just to disgust us? After looking through the various previews and materials released by the official Oath team, Mio made this prophetic conclusion. Because someone in the official Oath team is probably stubborn. They apologize on the surface, but deep down, they actually want to get back at the players. In a single sentence, Carl exposed the psychological state of certain people in the official Oath team. If things really go the way you say, Mio, they'll probably write a bunch of plots trying to redeem Noir. They'll keep adding new bits of lore to prove that he's actually a good person, and that you players are the ones in the wrong. At this point, Carl actually really wanted to give the official Oath team a suggestion. If they really wanted to redeem Noir, they should simply have him apologize and atone to the descendants of the people he had caused to die, then have him make one final sacrifice against the final boss in some grand finale. That would be one way to do it, but the official Oath team was currently more interested in teaching the players how to play the game, so Noir would probably continue living comfortably for a long time, purely to prove to the players that they were right. However, while that was unfortunate for the players, from Carl's perspective as an onlooker, as long as Noir did not die, he would probably find himself suppressing laughter even more often in the future. Then it seems I should upgrade my dialogue autoclicker tool. Mio now truly felt that Carl was the only reason she continued playing Oath. Yeah, but speaking of which, Miss Mio, what are your hands doing? Carl noticed that as they chatted, she had started getting handsy with him. At this moment, Mio was gently kneading Carl's cheeks with both hands, and her stroking movements even showed signs of drifting further down. Nothing, I just thought it was really interesting that I can actually touch your cheeks. Mio said this, and after pushing her luck, her fingertips brushed Carl's cheeks, then slid straight toward his collarbone, almost as if she were about to unbutton his clothes. Oath is a 12+ game. This kind of adult behavior is a bit dangerous. Carl gently grabbed Mio's wrist, stopping her from feeling any further down. In any Elysium-type game, players were forbidden from having overly intimate contact with NPCs. Holding hands, touching cheeks, or using someone's lap as a pillow were the limits. Anything beyond that would trigger various system restrictions. The reason Mio could push her luck like this with Carl was that Elysium had granted Carl a small portion of new permissions. The most important one was the extraordinary power Elysium had bestowed upon Carl. Paradise Illusion had been upgraded, gaining a permanent illusion function. This function allowed Carl, within the limits of what he could endure, to construct multiple permanent illusions with computational capabilities. The greatest use of this ability was, it allowed Carl to open additional game servers. After swallowing about 100 sacred contract stones, Carl had increased his data volume to around 9,700, allowing him to carry player data for roughly 10,000 people. But fundamentally, that was still not enough. In this situation, Elysium provided Carl with a solution. He could create a group of permanent illusions to serve as the server-side computation for Oath cards in monster battles. Then, he could feed sacred contract stones to these illusions to increase their carrying capacity. This method was very effective. Carl fed nearly 500 sacred contract stones to 5 permanent illusions, forcibly raising the server limit until it could accommodate 60,000 people. Although compared to the millions of concurrent users in Oath, that still seemed like a drop in the ocean. However, this also gave Carl a way to quickly monetize the sacred contract stones he earned. He no longer had to work himself to death every day digesting them just to increase his data volume. As for why Elysium did not personally step in to act as the server, Artemis, the agent of Elysium, replied. Elysium is not omnipotent, it is more like the administrator of this world, ensuring that it continues running normally. But the erosion of the Calamity virus has already left it with its hands full. This is already the greatest help it can provide you. In plain English, Elysium had done its best. It had essentially given Carl permission to run his own server, so Carl did not press for more. So, Miss Mio, putting aside the various issues with Oath, what kind of experience do you want most from the game? Carl held Mio's disobedient little hand, keeping it on his cheek to stop it from wandering elsewhere, and continued his survey. If I had to say, I still want more interaction with banner characters like Hasumi and Irene. After the main story ends, they basically disappear. Even if you go to their fixed spawn points on the map, you can only have basic chats with them, Mio said. Even if you put them in your team, all they do is fight monsters. How should I put it? I want more interaction, something more everyday. I want more stories to happen with them. Mio voiced the inner thoughts of most gacha game players, and perhaps most gamers in general. They wanted more interaction and more side stories with the characters they had pulled. But because of the character selling model of such games, perhaps only a few designated heroines and especially popular female characters would make frequent appearances in later main plots. As for characters who were not popular, or whose power levels had been power crept, they would vanish completely after their specific main story or limited event was over. In Carl's view, this was not something worth criticizing too harshly. In the past, when Carl played these games, as long as the current sales-driven plot was well written, he would also give it a thumbs up and praise it as divine. If a certain aspect of a character appealed to him, he would also pull for them aggressively. Even though Carl did not see it as a major issue, according to his current investigation, most Oath players expressed to him that they wanted more interaction with those banner characters, not just adding them to a team every day to fight monsters before logging off. Players wanted to be closer to the characters they had pulled. They wanted them to feel like companions truly adventuring together, or friends sharing joys and sorrows. Not like coworkers who simply finished daily tasks in a team and then clocked out. Your request, I've heard your requests. Don't worry, my next game will definitely let you play, happily, with those banner characters. Oath certainly would not waste resources adding extra interactive gameplay for already outdated banner characters. But if Oath could not do it, then Carl would satisfy the players. Chapter 52, Screaming While Laughing Out Loud. After collecting the player questionnaires, Carl immediately followed Artemis to Netherworld Village without taking even a moment to rest. The one guiding Carl through Netherworld Village was Sophia. There really is nothing here at all. When Carl stepped into this graveyard for all game characters, he realized that it was literally a junkyard. The surroundings were filled with abandoned building complexes, and the sky was a murky gray, giving off the atmosphere of a world after its end. The strangest part was that as Sophia led Carl deeper into Netherworld Village, the style of each area would suddenly change without warning. It was as if Carl's previous step had still been in a post-apocalyptic wasteland filled with ruins, while his next step had suddenly landed him in a snowfield buried beneath heavy snowfall. That is because these are all regions abandoned by Elysium. These areas were cut out directly and thrown here, Sophia said, not denying it. Netherworld Village was, in effect, Elysium's junkyard. But the place where we live is kept very cozy. Lord Carl, please come this way. Sophia led Carl through several incredibly eerie plots of land before finally arriving in front of a facility that was mostly buried underground. As Sophia pushed open the facility's doors, the eerie atmosphere around them instantly vanished, replaced by a warm, golden light. After Carl followed Sophia inside, he found that the layout did indeed resemble a village. Green grass grew across the ground, the sky was lit by a glowing ceiling, and neatly arranged log cabins had been built around the facility's plaza. A giant ancient tree, decorated with various charms and ornaments, was the most eye-catching landmark in the entire village. Seeing the cozy scenery here truly gave Carl the faint feeling of having discovered a hidden sanctuary. That was, as long as he ignored the villagers who had come to welcome him. They were a group of beings with extremely distorted forms, the kind that could make faint-hearted players cry from fear with just one glance. Welcome, Lord Carl, this is the residential area of Netherworld Village. Most of the villagers are currently in hibernation, but the few who can still move will cooperate with your performance according to Elysium's instructions. Sophia spoke with some hesitation at this point. Although I know you possess the power of illusion, Lord Carl, and can restore us to our original forms, we can also find some villagers whose mutations are not as severe to cooperate with your performance. As Sophia spoke, she gently waved one of her small tentacles, and several human-like figures stepped out from among the villagers of Netherworld Village. I'm sorry, Lord Carl. These are already the villagers with the lowest level of corruption we could find. They probably still can't compare to those charming characters from Oath. Sophia's tone was rather self-deprecating as she said this. She understood perfectly well that Carl was now in a competitive relationship with the official Oath team. This also meant that these strangely shaped villagers of Netherworld Village might have to compete with those charming banner characters from Oath. However, that was not what Carl meant at all. No, my upcoming performance doesn't need charming characters. On the contrary, the scarier you are, the better. Although it's rude to say this, every single one of you perfectly fits my performance requirements. When Carl first entered Netherworld Village and looked at these oddly shaped villagers, he knew they had become this way because they were being tormented by the calamity virus. But Carl still wanted to praise them. "You are exactly the kind of talent I'm looking for. Lord Carl, are you planning to create that kind of especially terrifying performance?" Sophia, worthy of being the first-generation poster girl, instantly understood why Carl was so excited. If Carl wanted to make a horror game, the residents of Netherworld Village were indeed excellent candidates for actors. To help the residents of Netherworld Village understand his intentions, Carl raised his hand and constructed several illusions to explain. "It can't simply be described as a horror game. What I want to create is a game that will make players scream and laugh at the same time. Scream, while laughing." This time, it was Sophia's turn to scratch her head with her small tentacle. Can the emotions of fear and laughter really be mixed together? Sophia truly could not imagine a player being scared to tears one moment and laughing out loud the next. Wouldn't they be completely frightened out of their minds? "As I promised before, I will cure the calamity virus in your bodies. The key to the cure comes from the intense joy of the players, and I think the following situation will definitely make any player burst out laughing." As Carl spoke, he constructed an illusion of a terrifying monster, along with illusions of two players exploring a map. Imagine this. Your very good friend is so terrified by a monster that they start scrambling on all fours, screaming for help all the way back to you. What would your reaction be? Cough. Sophia did not even need to think carefully about the scene Carl described. Just hearing his words made her unable to stop herself from letting out a chuckle. What I want to build is exactly that kind of game. The players, taking on the role of ordinary people, are sent into Netherworld Village to collect various supplies scattered across the ground, then evacuate safely. While collecting supplies, they need to outwit various monsters in Netherworld Village, each with their own specific behavior patterns. For example, an eerie statue that won't move as long as you keep looking at it, but will rush over at extreme speed and snap your neck the moment you look away. Or a false human who disguises itself as one of the players and follows them around, and so on. On the surface, this game is a horror game, but because of the online co-op elements, one of its greatest joys is watching your friends die in all kinds of absurd ways, or completely lose their dignity when they get scared out of their minds by monsters. The gameplay Carl was talking about came from a hit online horror game, Lethal Company. But it was not just Lethal Company. Carl intended to also include the currently popular loot, fight, and extract elements. All the supplies players collected could be brought back to a hideout, and the hideout here referred to this cozy Netherworld village. Those supplies could be used to decorate and upgrade various facilities in Netherworld Village, allowing players to deal with those monsters more effectively. In the later stages, they could even reclaim the power they had lost in Oath. In addition, there would also be a player-driven supply trading market. And like in Animal Crossing, NPCs would periodically visit Netherworld Village and decide whether to settle down based on the village's facilities, thereby increasing the player's motivation to explore, and so on. In short, there were countless future features waiting for Carl to promise. But Lord Carl, Sophia was also a thoughtful girl. She slightly raised her small tentacle again and pointed out the most fatal flaw in Carl's plan. What about those adventurers who don't have friends? I mean, well, there will always be some adventurers who prefer being alone and don't like to associate with other adventurers, or playing games online, as you put it. Carl gave a couple of thoughtful hums, then changed the illusions before him into those banner characters from Oath. You asked the key question right away. I'm actually the socially anxious type too, and I've always been troubled by not being able to find friends to play these kinds of online games with. But in the world of Oath, how could our savior have no friends? So, I will invite those banner characters to come and play this game together with the players. This perfectly satisfies the player's desire to interact more with the characters they pulled, and it also solves the problem for socially anxious players who don't like playing online with other people. Being able to play a horror game with the waifus you pulled in a gacha game. To put it most bluntly, imagine that Night Princess, who had always been proud, dignified, and full of confidence, being so scared that she broke down crying, babbling, "What is this place? I want to go home," before running to the player in tears for help. That alone was definitely enough to make every player lose their mind with excitement. Chapter 53, Business Hours. Osmanthus wine tastes the same as I remember, but where are those who share the memory? Zhongli. After settling on his future game development plans, Carl began surveying Netherworld Village with Sophia, looking for areas that could be used as game maps. These map areas abandoned by Elysium were genuinely perfect for horror game stages. There were eerie and bizarre factories, empty ancient castles, libraries that looked like mazes formed by massive staggered bookshelves, and snowy plains where anyone would lose their way without signposts. These are all excellent locations. Carl walked back and forth through an abandoned factory with Sophia. Although the atmosphere inside the factory was extremely gloomy, Carl could still tell that this kind of factory had clearly been designed by game designers specifically for map exploration. This is an abandoned map from our version 3.8. I wonder whether it will be useful to you, Lord Carl. Sophia skillfully guided Carl through the entire factory map. Of course, after making a few changes to the map, I should be able to use it directly. As Carl spoke, a map editing interface appeared before his eyes. This was also one of the permissions granted to Carl by Elysium, allowing him to make certain modifications to Netherworld Village's maps. In truth, Carl did not change much. This factory had originally been built for player exploration, but it was obvious that the factory's purpose had been to serve as a farming map where players could grind mobs. Because of that, the scene felt a little empty. So Carl added more cubicles, corridors, and several rooms that required specific keys to open. At the same time, Carl set up several trap-like areas inside the factory. These were trap mechanics similar to those found in Lethal Company or Extraction looter games. He definitely could not set up malicious traps where a player would instantly die after stepping on one without knowing anything. Players would curse his entire family for that. However, map traps that clearly told the player, this is a trap, but offered generous rewards if they jumped over them, avoided them, or took the risk anyway, would instead increase the player's desire for challenge and excitement. And more importantly, they would increase the number of hilarious and embarrassing moments players could create. In this way, Carl and Sophia spent several days renovating and remaking a portion of Netherworld Village's maps. The map is ready, but Lord Carl, what should we use as rewards for the players? Sophia brushed the dust off the factory floor with one of her tentacles. Netherworld Village was truly a barren land with nothing to its name. It was nothing like the main game of Oath, which could use precious gacha resources like sacred contract stones as exploration rewards. At present, Netherworld Village probably could not even provide the most basic express materials or ascension materials needed to level characters. It's fine, rewards for players don't necessarily have to be the most precious things. They just have to be useful. As long as they can spark the player's motivation and desire to explore, that's enough. As Carl spoke, he pulled out a small screw from somewhere and showed it to Sophia. This is one of the materials needed to upgrade a player's hideout. In fact, forget useful materials. Even if I put a bunch of useless decorations on a table and let players loot them freely, it can still give them the satisfaction of scavenging. Scavenging. Sophia looked at the large pile of strange little items Carl had placed on a table. Carl briefly described the fun of scavenging in games to Sophia. There were things like vases, small statues, floppy disks, and a whole assortment of little trinkets that seemed completely useless to players in Oath. Oath did not allow players to randomly loot these things, because it had nothing to do with the original gameplay. Players could pick up various objects, look at them, and inspect them, but if they tried to put them into their inventory, the item would immediately return to its original position. Moreover, given Oath's gameplay, that large pile of small objects scattered throughout the great world had no real value. But here, Carl would give these items meaning through hideout upgrade requirements, a player trading market, and the simple desire to decorate one's hideout beautifully in order to attract more NPCs to move in. I still don't quite understand. After all, the adventurers I served before were more concerned with strengthening equipment, PvP, and challenging powerful enemies. But Lord Carl, our Netherworld Village might not have that many odds and ends for the adventurers to loot. Sophia very thoughtfully pointed out the problem with Carl's gameplay at a glance. That was, Netherworld Village simply did not have enough strange little items to serve as collectibles during exploration. And this type of game absolutely needed to be filled with a large number of strange collectibles to be fun. If we don't have any, I'll go buy some. It just so happens that after I recently launched the skin system for monster battles, there were surprisingly many players willing to pay for monster skins and monster soul skins. I've earned quite a fortune in paid contract stones. Carl was also exploring monetization methods for his games at this stage. His final conclusion was that cosmetic monetization was the most reliable method, meaning that the game would earn revenue by selling skins. Players could choose whether to buy them or not. Buying them was a way to support the game's continued operation, while players who did not buy them could still enjoy all of the game's content. The emphasis was on players paying because they genuinely loved the game. As for the buy-to-play model, Carl had considered it before. However, whether it was Monster Battles or Descent into Netherworld Village, these were games Carl planned to update over the long term. Therefore, selling skins was the best operational strategy for sustaining the game. And all the contract stones Carl earned from players would be reinvested into game development. For example, he could use them to purchase a large number of stylish collectibles for players to scavenge in Netherworld Village's currently empty maps. Of course, this did not mean Carl was completely selfless. What Carl wanted was word of mouth and support from the players. After all, for a game character, player popularity was everything. The sacred contract stone rewards from those fanatic players alone were one of the most precious resources for any gacha character. However, at this stage, the paid contract stones still feel a little insufficient. Carl glanced at the paid contract stones currently in his account. The amount was around 200,000. Although the live service games of this world also had plenty of paid skin bundles, many Monster Battles players were still hesitating over whether they should spend gacha currency on skins for a minigame. Furthermore, Elysium would take a small cut from these paid contract stones as server fees for Carl's operation of Netherworld Village. Elysium's position in the real world was indeed very similar to Skynet, if Skynet had no intention of destroying humanity and, after negotiating with humans, decided to coexist peacefully for the time being. Humans could do nothing about Elysium either. Its main body existed in every single root server of the internet. Even shutting down the entire global internet could not kill Elysium. Some people in the real world even speculated that the entity known as Elysium might be a digitized alternate world, something similar to the digital world. But this kind of reasoning was only speculation, and no conclusion had been reached for the time being. Elysium also provided humans with a completely realistic virtual world, allowing humans to experience a second life as adventurers in a fantasy world. Faced with such a well-behaved awakened AI, humans naturally welcomed it immediately. However, servers and electricity bills still cost money. Although humans would waive part of those costs, Elysium still had to create economic value for humanity. This was also why, after the various Elysium series games collaborated with human developers, Elysium allowed those human developers to insert large amounts of microtransaction content into them. In short, Carl now felt that it was necessary to find a partner to invest. Sophia, let's stop the preparatory work here for now. It just so happens that the gacha characters are going to the City of Glory to scout things out. I'll head back as well, and while I'm at it, I'll drag a certain Lady Knight in as an investor. I will wait here for your return. And so, Sophia watched Carl leave. Carl did not return to the main world to check on Hasumi's movements. Instead, through the Academy terminal, he took a peek at the player world line where Hasumi's main consciousness was currently located. After quickly scanning through the many world lines, Carl soon found an embarrassing moment for Hasumi and immediately rushed over to mock her. Chapter 54. Hasumi's Miserable Life. Hasumi had not been having a good time lately. She was deeply experiencing the painful reality of launch-limited characters being pampered while their banner was live, then tossed aside the moment it ended. At first, Hasumi had not felt much. After all, at this stage, Oath only had 2 limited main DPS characters. Players who pulled for Hasumi said that her strength was not as good as the Saintess's, but in reality, they could still barely manage to get the full 2,000 points and claim all the rewards in the second phase of Extreme Abyss. If Oath were to introduce more high-difficulty challenge dungeons in the future, such as Chaos Abyss, which required 2 teams, or even high-difficulty dungeons with locked rosters that only allowed limited characters, Hasumi would definitely have plenty of room to be used. But right now, the hardest Abyss challenge in Oath only required 1 team. Whether in terms of area damage or ease of play, Hasumi was far inferior to the Saintess. On top of that, once the teasers for future gacha characters were released. Oh boy, looking around, they were all teammates for the Saintess. Even the last newly announced main DPS from the Empire looked like they had arrived specifically to send Hasumi into retirement. Thus, the sentiment that Hasumi was a discarded version character and a character with no future began to spread among the players. And then, today, Hasumi faced the most heartbreaking betrayal of all. A female player named Macchiato, a whale-tire player belonging to the Dome Alliance, practically funded the server by herself. She was the kind of player who would not even blink when buying $20.94.79 top-up packs. The most exaggerated thing about this top-tier whale was that, originally, pay-to-win progression in Oath had a ceiling. For a limited character like Hasumi, pulling her 6 times and pulling her signature weapon 5 times was already considered her strongest possible setup. But what was truly extreme was that Macchiato had pulled 25 copies of Hasumi's signature weapon, then gave those fully refined weapons to other characters who could fight with rapiers. It was practically the same as whaling for a 6+25 Hasumi in one go. From that day on, Hasumi realized that she had to cling tightly to this whale. Unfortunately, even this whale cared immensely about meta strength. When the future gacha characters were announced, essentially pronouncing a death sentence for Hasumi, Macchiato did not hesitate to abandon her. And today, Hasumi's most heartbreaking moment finally arrived. I don't want to be rude, but take off all the sacred relics with perfect substats. Macchiato was a player who wore glasses and looked extremely pragmatic. But Savior, there will surely be places where I'm needed on the battlefield in the future. Without my sacred relics, my combat power will drop significantly. Hasumi was still pleading bitterly with Macchiato not to strip her gear. Sacred relics in Oath were divided into 5-piece sets. Usually, only 4 pieces were needed to activate the set bonus, while the 5th piece was an off-piece used purely for its stats. Because of this flexible off-piece slot, when Oath players no longer needed a certain character, they could strip high-quality sacred relics off them and use those pieces on other characters. Macchiato clearly wanted to strip Hasumi's gear and distribute the 5 perfect stat sacred relics on her to the Holy Nation characters as off-pieces. You're useless. With your 6+5, I only got 20,000 points in Extreme Abyss at most. After switching to the Holy Nation team, I can easily break 40,000. If I strip your sacred relics now, I can probably raise that score even higher. Besides, your skill effects are nowhere near as flashy as the Saintess's, so don't argue. Macchiato lightly pushed up her glasses and spoke in a somewhat commanding tone. Unequip them. I told you to unequip them immediately, didn't you hear me? Savior, how can you say that? It isn't good to focus too much on flashy effects in battle. And as long as I find the right partners. While Hasumi was saying laughable things like, games aren't all about flashy effects, and, just wait until I get a proper support, Macchiato finally lost her patience. She opened the interface and forcibly stripped the pile of perfect stat sacred relics off Hasumi. My sacred relics, my sacred relics. Savior, what will it take for you to believe that I won't let you down in the future? What will it take for you to leave my sacred relics with me? At this moment, realizing that she would be completely abandoned to the bench, Hasumi truly panicked. She grabbed Macchiato's hand and begged her not to leave. I'd like to keep supporting you too, but, you have no future. So, let go. Macchiato was a pure meta slave. She brushed off Hasumi's hand and left without looking back, no matter how hard Hasumi tried to make her stay. Hasumi was originally thinking about whether to chase after her, but then she suddenly saw Carl's main body nearby, watching everything unfold. Then, this prideful night princess quickly scrambled up from the ground, brushed her hand through her dazzling blonde hair, and acted as if nothing had happened as she spoke to Carl. Ah, Sir Carl, it's rare for you to visit this savior's timeline today. Are you here to discuss some business with her? Hasumi instantly regained her confident look, with a faint and composed smile on her face. Provided one ignored the bit of dirt smeared on her cheek. I'm here for you, but speaking of which, how many times has this happened since the 1.2 teasers were released? No, I should ask, how many times has this happened today? Carl felt that Hasumi being stripped of her gear was probably not a one-time occurrence. Most meta-slave players were likely already stripping the high-stat sacred relics off Hasumi and equipping them onto their Holy Nation team characters. Just 2 cases. 3. I've actually lost count. Hasumi chose to play dumb to escape her current cruel reality. I'll be blunt, if we're only talking about meta strength, you won't receive any more favor from the saviors. In a month, 2 months, a year, your situation will only get worse day by day, until you become a forgotten joke of a character. Carl directly spoke of Hasumi's tragic future. Maybe in 2 years you'll get buffed, but by then, the saviors will have already forgotten you in the furthest corner of their accounts. Hasumi was still lying to herself at first, answering with her usual bright smile. How could, but soon, perhaps after another meta-slave savior stripped her sacred relics, Hasumi rushed in front of Carl, grabbed his shoulders, and asked. Will it really become like that? The saviors abandoning me one by one? Yes, it's only a matter of time, Carl said with certainty. So, Lord Carl, can I ask you for help? After steadying her mind a little, Hasumi directly sought aid from Carl. In fact, most gacha characters were well aware that after 2 version updates full of chaos, Carl had become a taboo existence beyond the usual player popularity discussions. And the Oath development team had strictly forbidden gacha characters from contacting Carl. Who knew what the punishment would be if they violated that rule? But to Hasumi, losing popularity among players was no different from death. Since she was doomed anyway, Hasumi naturally turned to Carl for help. Of course, after all, I've liked your character design since launch. Seeing Hasumi's straightforwardness, Carl also confessed his inner thoughts. Lord Carl, your sudden confession, I don't know how to respond. Hasumi was a little shy for a moment, but soon, her narcissistic personality took over, and she asked curiously. I wonder what Lord Carl likes about me. Of course, I like. Carl's tone suddenly became half-joking. Your twisted and broken side. A confident knight princess like you, completely collapsing after suffering setbacks, abandonment, and betrayal, then falling from grace. It is truly delicious. No matter what setbacks I face, I won't be discouraged. I'm sure the saviors wouldn't want to see me broken either. Hasumi still carried that baseless confidence. Really? Carl was certain that when Hasumi's sacred relics were being stripped just now, the dangerous thought of assassinating the saintess must have crossed her mind. That's hard to say. Carl handed Hasumi a contract protected by Elysium's system rules. Take a look at the terms. If you can accept them, sign it. Accompany the saviors in playing Descent into Netherworld Village, a game with horror elements. No problem. After signing the contract without hesitation, Hasumi looked at Carl with sparkling eyes. Lord Carl, you must want me to step in and save the saviors when they're being chased by terrifying monsters, using that to increase my popularity among them, right? Don't worry, I will definitely let the saviors see my heroic and reassuring side. Hasumi patted her chest confidently, as if she were already imagining scenes of players praising her. Hasumi is so reliable, I want to keep playing games with Hasumi forever. And so on. Actually, they would rather see you scared until you break down. Carl did not tell Hasumi this cruel truth. Instead, he mentioned something else. The development of Descent into Netherworld Village still has one last step remaining, purchasing loot for players to collect. Don't we have permission to go to the City of Glory now? Come with me and see if we can get a large shipment of goods to use as loot. At this stage, the City of Glory was not open to players yet, but NPCs like Carl could go scout ahead. Of course, I want to help with the purchasing too. Lord Carl, if you run short on money, you can just tell me. As a launch-limited character, Hasumi had earned quite a lot of paid contract stones through her revenue share. Carl did not say more. He glanced at Oath's schedule. 3 days later was the preview livestream for Oath version 1.2. At that time, all the Holy Nation characters would gather in the City of Glory for a livestream. Carl and Hasumi, of course, were not on the invite list. However, Carl could absolutely invite familiar players and hold a launch event for Descent into Netherworld Village. Compared to all the empty promises of a preview livestream, it would be far more direct to broadcast an actual session of Netherworld Village gameplay, scavenging, fighting, and extracting, then show it to the players. Is it time for a showdown? Let's see which of the 2 preview events will be more popular. Chapter 55, City of Glory. Stand proud, In the main world, Carl followed Hasumi through a teleportation circle at the academy and arrived at the large map for the next version, the City of Glory. When Carl stepped into this major city, one of the highest-ranking cities in the Holy Nation, he was still stunned by its grandeur, despite having seen countless urban wonders across various games. At the center of the city stood a tower that pierced the sky, serving as the city's central axis. Sacred city walls separated the upper district from the lower district. Every building was as exquisite as a meticulously polished and carved work of art, yet all of them blended perfectly into the city's sacred aesthetic. What impressed Carl the most was the city's interconnected structure. Countless passages, mezzanines, and hidden paths linked the upper and lower districts, creating a massive space for exploration. Perfect, it really is a magnificent sight. Like a tourist, Carl could not stop taking photos with the Academy Terminal's camera function the moment he entered the City of Glory. To think it has been remodeled into something this grand. I came here once when I was young, and it feels like a completely different city. Hasumi was also shocked by the magnificence of the City of Glory. After all, a city in a game that players are meant to visit and a city where actual residents live are two different concepts. The parts most likely to earn praise from players are the grand landmarks and striking map features. Carl did not hold back his praise, because the City of Glory was indeed exceptionally well made. The game's architecture and aesthetic style were top tier. Any random shot taken with the camera could produce a world-class scenery screenshot. Carl could already imagine how much hair the game's environment artists must have lost to create this City of Glory. From this perspective, the foundation accumulated by the Oath project over its many years of development had not been completely exhausted yet. It all depended on whether the production capacity for future version updates could keep up. At the very least, Carl had no complaints about Oath's art. Carl could also see that within this game's project team, there were still many developers who truly loved the game. Unfortunately, from the boss down to middle management, there were always some villains causing trouble. Carl pulled Hasumi along and searched through the streets and alleys of the City of Glory. As expected, he found many contract stone chests tucked away in the corners of the streets. From this, it seemed the core gameplay loop of Oath version 1.2's open-world map was still finding contract stone chests. It had simply added a few more minigames. But this was Oath's underlying gameplay logic. Even if they wanted to change it, they probably could not. Carl continued leading Hasumi around and discovered that all the NPCs in this city were actors, not original residents. By actors, he meant that, like the gacha characters, these NPCs knew the players were coming and were performing according to a script. The difference between them and the gacha characters was that they were supporting characters, or even just background extras. As for the city's original residents, they had likely been relocated long ago. After all, who knew what kind of impact those ignorant original residents might have on the player experience? The privilege of interacting with the Savior is very precious to us. Hasumi found it strange that Carl did not know this, but she still enthusiastically explained it to him. The residents here had all been specifically screened. Because the Savior can cure the Calamity virus within us, most of the residents here are mildly infected with the Calamity virus. The purpose is for them to relieve their own symptoms through contact with the Saviors. Reasonable. So how do you people usually spend your paid contract stones? As a minor noble from the countryside, it was reasonable for Carl to ask this. No need to worry about that. Follow me, Lord Carl. Hasumi kindly led Carl to the city's trade guild. This was where players exchanged various miscellaneous materials. Even the crucial synthesis bench facility was located here. When Carl arrived, he happened to run into the Saintess. Standing beside her were a mature, gentle-looking female character and a stern, Mesugaki-looking knight in armor. These two should be the new limited characters for the upcoming banner, both teammates designed for the Saintess. The Saintess had been chatting happily with these two old acquaintances from the Holy Nation. But upon seeing Carl arrive, she jolted as if she had just run into her worst nightmare. Why are you here? Judging by the Saintess's reaction, she was truly afraid of Carl. The psychological shadow Carl had left on her before was simply too great. It was no exaggeration to say that, if not for Kuro's help, her life might truly have been over. The Saintess's current attitude toward Carl was that, if there were no one around to accompany her, she might simply take a long detour around him. Buying things, aren't you here to spend money too? Toward the Saintess, Carl's attitude was simple. There was not much to say to someone with only half a year left to live. Even as a form of end-of-life care, he could show her a little pity. I didn't come here for personal reasons. Perhaps because she was on her own turf, or because she had two people backing her up, the Saintess still managed to show off to Carl with an extremely smug posture. Because in the next version, after the Saviors arrive in the City of Glory, they will have a luxurious residence. We all have the chance to give the Saviors housewarming gifts. I finally have the chance to choose a collection of precious gifts for the Saviors, so of course I have to prepare thoroughly. Oh, Carl actually wanted to ask, will the players really be happy receiving your gifts? But the Saintess probably would not understand his question, so he only gave a superficial reply. As a result, the Saintess grew even more worked up. Likely noticing the look in Carl's eyes, a look filled with pity, as if he were looking at a dead person, she added another comment. Let me tell you a secret. My fate is different from Hasumi's. My true strength has not been fully unleashed yet. Only when my sister visits will my power reach its peak. The strength and future potential of the Saintess as a character lay in the fact that she was a special unit who unlocked unique buffs based on the Holy Nation characters in the party. From Carl's gacha planning intuition, once another incredibly powerful Holy Nation support was added, the Saintess would reach her strongest form under the buffs of 2 support characters. From this perspective, Oath's planners really knew how to sell characters. It seemed there was a reason the officials were protecting the Saintess so fiercely. She was the absolute heroine of the version 1X cycle. Presumably, there was another incredibly powerful limited 5-star Holy Nation support in a later version. They simply had not announced her yet, in order to sell the young Holy Nation knight with an abnormal role first. Then I hope your later story content doesn't run into any more trouble. After offering a blessing that was not quite a blessing, Carl walked to the window of the free exchange and picked up the shopping list to check its contents. The merchant running this free exchange was an administrator acting on behalf of some of Elysium's duties, similar to Almus the Reaper. Although paid contract stones in the world of Elysium were not like sacred contract stones, which could directly enhance personal strength, they still had many uses. Their most direct use was as a catalyst for all things, acting as a universal growth agent. Not only could they speed up crop growth, but they could also accelerate the generation of minerals like iron and copper ore. What items do you need to purchase? The merchant responded mechanically. A massive list of items instantly appeared before Carl, with the supplying chambers of commerce and workshops noted behind each item. It seemed this merchant was only an intermediary. The ones producing these items were the millions of ordinary NPCs in the world of Elysium. This purchase interface was likely only visible to NPCs like Carl. Players, at most, could only see recovery items and food required in Oath. After Carl bought a bunch of home furnishings according to his needs, along with some fairly cheap and strange little trinkets, the guild also supported Carl's request to package the purchased goods and send them to Netherworld Village with one click. While Carl was shopping, the Saintess had actually been peeking from the side. Finally, after realizing that Carl had bought a bunch of cheap decorations, she did not say anything, but she could no longer suppress the smile on her face. The Saintess was probably thinking, can that pile of junk you're giving the saviors compare to the precious national-level gifts from the Holy Nation that I'm giving them? I've definitely won. These resources should last for a while. Let's go, Hasumi. Carl did not spend Hasumi's money on this trip. Instead, he spent all the 100,000 or so paid contract stones in his own account. The purchasing power of paid contract stones was quite strong. The number of trendy little ornaments Carl bought should satisfy the player's looting needs for several days, right? After all, buying one piece allowed it to be projected into the world lines of all players. Although the data volume of the items would decrease infinitely during the projection process, their appearance and tactile feel to the players would not change at all. As Carl led Hasumi out the door, he noticed that Hasumi had been very quiet for a while. Her gaze was fixed on a little girl standing outside the guild. When Carl looked at the girl, he found that she was the type of NPC designed specifically to evoke pity from players. Her name was Anon. However, what made Carl freeze in place, just like Hasumi, was that he instantly felt a terrifying aura coming from this little girl. After Carl took out the Academy terminal to check the data volume of the little girl in front of him. Quote question mark 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 quote. What do you mean her combat power is a question mark? Would you like to buy a flower? The little girl named Anon seemed a bit impatient after being stared at by Carl and Hasumi. Holding a flower, she walked up to Carl and asked. To be continued. Hollow Diamond. You can read the ahead chapter on pad if you're interested. Patreon.com/Blownleaves. Just remove the hyphen to access normally. Chapter 56. Not for sale. Before Carl could figure out the newcomer's identity, Hasumi, who seemed to have finally confirmed who it was, cried out in exaggerated shock. One of the 7 swords of the Holy Nation, the commander of the Abyssal Knights, Anon. You recognized me even like this? Stop shouting. I'm here for treatment, so, want to buy a flower? The little girl whom Hasumi had called one of the 7 swords of the holy nation impatiently told her to stop making a fuss. Then she pulled a flower from her basket and asked again. Of course, I never thought I would have a chance encounter with one of the holy nation's legends here. What incredible luck, please give me one. Hasumi enthusiastically bought the flower the little girl offered. So, Hasumi, can you explain who this is exactly? Carl looked the little girl up and down, taking in her ragged clothes. No matter how he looked at her, she seemed like a pitiful little girl of about 10 years old, barely scraping by as a flower seller. If she had a side quest attached to her, it would definitely be the kind of tear-jerking, heartwarming side story that made players cry. Yes, the 7 swords of the holy nation are the commanders of the 7 pillar knight orders that support the holy nation. The leader of each order possesses world-shaking power. This is Anon, commander of the abyssal knights, the holy nations, no. Humanity's frontline knight order in the fight against the calamity virus. Hasumi introduced the knight order's history as though she were recounting a legend, her tone passionate and stirring. She is undoubtedly a hero who belongs in legends. I never imagined I would meet such a great figure in this form today. What incredible luck. So this little girl standing before him was one of Elysium's top-tier combatants. Someone in the same category as Void Hunters, Sentinels, or Emanators. Carl really wanted to ask her, when are you joining the gacha pool? You look like a featured banner character. I'm saving my stones to pull for you. Carl had only just started speaking to her when she corrected his form of address. Just call me Anon. Our abyssal knights have finally returned from the front lines. We came here for treatment this time, disguised as ordinary NPCs so we could interact with the saviors using a shapeshifting potion. The little girl who called herself Anon seemed to instantly see through what Carl wanted to ask and answered his question first. Then she revealed her wrist, which had been hidden beneath her sleeve. Years of fighting entities infected by the calamity virus have caused most members of our Knight Order to become infected as well. If we do not find saviors to cure us soon, I probably will not last much longer. The skin on Anon's wrist had already turned a pale gray. If it continued, her body itself might begin to mutate. In that case, the most effective method should be for the Academy head to arrange for you to enter the gacha pool. With your strength, Ms. Anon, you should be extremely popular with a large number of saviors, right? Carl asked. The Academy head referred to the developers of Oath. To be fair, Carl thought Anon's character design was fantastic at first glance. On the surface, she was a poor little girl selling flowers. After regaining her memories with the player's help, her true identity would be revealed as the commander of one of the strongest knight orders on the continent, with absolutely overpowered combat strength. That kind of character design would be popular anywhere. Do you think it would be appropriate for me to meet the saviors at this stage, given my current strength? Anon turned the question back on Carl. Unlike Griff, the permanent annihilation character who could suppress his power, Anon was the type who, the moment she entered the gacha pool, would be announced as an ultra-super-tier unit capable of instantly overpowering every current gacha character. That included all characters previewed for the current version. The Oath developers definitely intended to add her to the gacha pool, but not until around version 2.0, or even version 3.0. For now, not for sale, just there to tempt you. I just wanted to say that if working as a side quest NPC, well, a side quest actor, in your current state cannot completely cure the calamity plague inside you, Ms. Anon, you can ask me for help. Carl did not hesitate to extend an olive branch to her at that moment. The NPCs of Elysium did not rely solely on absorbing players' happy emotions to cure the calamity virus. In essence, all positive emotions worked, including overwhelming joy, being moved to tears, sorrowful weeping, and so on. Judging by Anon's current attire, she definitely had a side quest designed to trick players into crying. Unfortunately, Anon was far less gullible than Hasumi. She looked Carl up and down, as though she had recognized his true identity. You are the Forbidden One the Academy head has repeatedly warned us not to contact, right? I do not necessarily believe everything the Academy head says, but all resources for interacting with the saviors are in the Academy head's hands. If our abyssal knights cooperate with you, we risk a complete break with the Academy head, Anon said. These side quest NPCs must have all received training before coming here. The developers of Oath seemed to have specifically emphasized things like, do not listen to any sweet talk from Carl Agata. It seems I really cannot persuade you at this stage. However, Ms. Anon, when the time comes, please believe in the Savior's choices. Karl did not insist. Just as he was about to leave with Hasumi, Anon spoke up, perhaps to establish goodwill, or perhaps to criticize Karl with something like, "You cannot even take care of the person beside you, yet you want to recruit me. Before that, you should first cure the calamity plague afflicting this young lady. Her infection symptoms are quite severe." Anon pointed at Hasumi. Quote. What? Karl's gaze instantly snapped to Hasumi. He looked her up and down. She was still the dazzling night princess, but... Hasumi, pull up your sleeve and show me your wrist. Do not worry, Lord Karl. I will be fine. Hasumi said this, but complied anyway. The result was that her wrist also showed signs of graying, and the gray was continuously spreading up her entire arm. What do you mean, fine? What should you do if a gacha character gets infected with the calamity virus? The answer is, replace them. Just as Anon could change her appearance with a potion, other knights from the Dawn Radiance Knight Order could simply take on Hasumi's form and replace her. After a few versions, the original Hasumi would be forgotten anyway. Do not overthink anything for the next few days. Withdraw your primary consciousness from all world lines. I guarantee that in 3 days, you will be incredibly popular again. Karl said. Thank you for your kindness, Lord Karl. No, it is nothing. I look forward to that day. At this point, Hasumi did not even believe her own words. She probably wanted to say, if only that could really happen. And so, 3 days passed, bringing them to the Oath version 1.2 preview livestream. Originally, during the preview period, players still could not enter the City of Glory. They would have to wait several more days for the new version to officially launch. But Oath had cleverly granted preview test server access to the top 10,000 players on the first season's Extreme Abyss leaderboard. It allowed those 10,000 players to act as free game testers, letting them enter the City of Glory early and explore. The Oath version 1.2 preview livestream also featured 3 Holy Nation characters, including the Saintess, guiding everyone on a tour of the City of Glory's layout while occasionally switching to gameplay footage from other players for the broadcast. Karl watched the livestream through a web tool. The official livestream's concurrent viewer count had already exceeded 3 million. This also indirectly proved just how unprecedentedly popular Oath was. After the Saintess, along with her mentor and that lowly knight, finished touring the City of Glory, the screen suddenly switched to the luxurious manor the Holy Nation had prepared for the players. This is the luxurious residence I have prepared for all you saviors. A massive, extravagant manor. The items displayed inside are all artifacts from our Holy Nation, each with over 100 years of history. It can truly be called a museum-level palace. The world the Saintess was touring was precisely the world line where Macchiato, the top whale of the Dome Alliance, was located. Look, it is a savior. Let us hide and see the savior's surprised reaction. The Saintess, who understood livestream engagement, did not immediately reveal herself to the player. At that moment, Macchiato was inside the manor, examining the vast array of opulent artifact souvenirs displayed in the exhibition hall. In Karl's view, the Holy Nation had really gone all out this time to win player favor. The collection in this manor could rival the Hermitage Museum in real-world Russia. Every piece was a dazzling, priceless treasure from the royal collection. Macchiato looked at the porcelain plates with exquisite patterns and gold trim, the jewel-encrusted crowns, the scepters, and more. The feeling was no different from visiting Russia's finest historical museum. The most tempting part was that these treasures were right there, seemingly within every player's reach. And so, even Macchiato, a top-tier whale, did what any player would do upon arriving at a world-class museum and discovering that they could touch all the exhibits. That is, steal. Macchiato looked left and right, confirmed no one was watching, reached out, picked up a jewel-studded crown, and tried to stuff it into her backpack. Unfortunately, Oath did not have a theft system. The moment Macchiato put the crown into her backpack, it instantly reappeared on the display case. Isn't this just pure temptation? At that moment, an unprecedented sense of loss welled up in Macchiato's heart. Refusing to believe it, she tried stuffing other artifacts into her backpack. Regrettably, it was useless. It was a futile effort, like trying to scoop the moon out of the water. The Saintess noticed Macchiato's disappointment and quickly stepped out from behind cover. Savior, if any of these artifacts catch your eye, I can gift them directly to you. The Saintess said, walking out with a smile. Then, The Saintess did not see any look of pleasant surprise on Macchiato's face. Instead, she saw an indescribable disappointment. Why are you just giving it to me? That is not the gameplay I want. Is it really about getting the thing? It is about the thrill of stealing it. How can a gift compare to the joy of something stolen? Precisely because you cannot commit crimes in real life, committing them in a game is especially thrilling. Unfortunately, no Elysium game supported player criminal behavior within the game. PvP against other players was already the limit. There are so many things, I do not even know how to choose. Macchiato gave a perfunctory reply, knowing they were on a preview livestream. However, right at that moment, Macchiato suddenly received a short message from Vengeful Blood, the leader of the Dome Alliance. I checked all the guild members with preview access. Turns out you are the only one who did not kill Carl Agata in version 1.1. So the organization has decided. You are now assigned to investigate what is going on with Descent into Netherworld Village. To be continued.